Socks, get out of the way. What are you doing? Oh my goodness. Socks, how many times do we have to go over this? You can't be in front of the camera when I'm trying to record. I know you miss them as much as I do, but it's not going to help when you're in front of the camera. Okay, Socks, can you just sit off to the side and then just listen while we read? Okay, good. By the way, yesterday, I don't know if you remember way back when I brought Socks home with me, like a month ago, and I sent you some pictures with Socks doing some things in my apartment. I have a little sign that says, "Eat more tacos," because who doesn't need to do that? Well, yesterday, Socks changed the words of tacos and put the words tuna. So it says, "Eat more tuna." I'll have to send you a picture. I couldn't believe it. I am certainly not going to eat more tuna. Maybe Socks will. I will stick with tacos. All right, let's get back to, we are on chapter 12, part 2. Milo is trying to steal a sound from the sound keeper. So let's see what happens next. Milo was crestfallen. He had no idea how to steal a sound, even the smallest one, for the sound keeper always had at least one eye carefully focused on him. Now for a look at the workshops, she cried, whisking him through another door and into a large, abandoned laboratory full of old pieces of equipment, all untended and rusting. "This is where we used to invent the sounds," she said wistfully. "Do they have to be invented?" asked Milo, who seemed surprised at almost everything she told him. "I thought they just were." "No one realizes how much trouble we go through to make them," she complained. "Why, at one time, this shop was crowded and busy from morning to night." "But how do you invent a sound?" Milo inquired. "Oh, that's very easy," she said. "First, you must decide exactly what the sound looks like, for each sound has its own exact shape and size. Then, you make some of them here in the shop, and grind each one 3 times into an invisible powder, and throw a little of each into the air every time you need it." "But I've never seen a sound," Milo insisted. "You never see them out there," she said, waving her arm in a general direction of everywhere, "except every once in a while on a very cold morning when they freeze. But in here, we see them all the time. Here, let me show you." She picked up a padded stick and struck a nearby bass drum 6 times. 6 large, woolly, fluffy cotton balls, each about 2 feet across, rolled silently onto the floor. "You see," she said, putting some of them into a large grinder. "Now listen." And she took a pinch of the invisible powder and threw it into the air with a boom, 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 boom. "Do you know what a hand clap looks like?" Milo shook his head. "Try it," she commanded. He clapped his hands once, and a single sheet of white paper fluttered to the floor. He tried it 3 more times, and 3 more sheets of paper did the very same thing. And then he applauded as fast as he could, and a great cascade of papers filled the air. Isn't that simple? And it's the same for all sounds. If you think about it, you'll soon know that each one, you'll soon know what each one looks like. Take laughter, for instance, she said, laughing brightly, and 1,000 tiny brightly colored bubbles flew into the air and popped noiselessly. Or speech, she continued. Some of it is light and airy, some sharp and pointed, but most of it, I'm afraid, is just heavy and dull. "How about music?" asked Milo excitedly. "Right over here, we weave it into our looms. Symphonies are the large, beautiful carpets with all the melodies and rhythms woven in. Concertos are those tapestries, and all the other bolts of cloth are serenades, waltzes, overtures, and rhapsodies. And we also have some of the songs that you often sing," she cried, holding up a handful of brightly colored handkerchiefs. She stopped for a moment and said sadly, "We even had one section over there that did nothing but put the sound of the ocean into seashells. This was once such a happy place." "Then why don't you make sound for everyone now?" he shouted, so eagerly that the soundkeeper leaped back in surprise. "Don't shout so, young man. If there's one thing we need more of around here, it's less noise. Now come with me and I'll tell you all about it. And put that down immediately." Her last remark was directed toward Milo's efforts to stuff one of the largest drum beats into his back pocket. Remember, he's trying to steal a sound. They returned quickly to the parlor, and when the sound keeper settled herself into a chair and carefully turned the radio, To a special hour of hush, Milo asked his question once again in a somewhat lower voice. "It doesn't make me happy to hold back the sounds," she began softly, "for if we listen carefully, they can sometimes tell us things far better than words." "But if that is so," asked Milo, and he had no doubt that it was, "shouldn't you release them?" "Never!" she cried. "They just use them to make horrible noises, which are ugly to see and worse to hear. I leave that all to Dr. Discord and this awful, awful din." "But some noises are good, aren't they?" he insisted. "That may be true," she replied stubbornly. "But if they won't make the sounds that I like, they won't make any." "But," he started to say, and it got no farther than that, for while he was about to say that he didn't think that that was quite fair, a thought to which the obstinate soundkeeper might not have taken kindly, he suddenly discovered the way he could carry his little sound from the fortress. In the instance between saying the word and before it sailed off into the air, he clamped his lips shut, and the butt was trapped in his mouth, all made but not spoken. "Well, I mustn't keep you all day," she said impatiently. "Now turn your pockets out so that I can see that you didn't steal anything and you can be on your way." When he had satisfied the soundkeeper, he nodded his farewell, for it would have been most impractical to say thank you or good afternoon, and raced out the door. So he has stolen a sound. What do you think, Socks? Should we keep going? Okay, let's keep going. Chapter 13, Unfortunate Conclusions. With his mouth shut tight and his feet moving as fast as thoughts could make them, Milo ran all the way back to the car. There was great excitement when he arrived as Tok raced happily down the road to greet him. The humbug personally accepted all congratulations from the crowd. "Where is the sound?" someone hastily scribbled on the blackboard, and they all waited anxiously for the reply. Milo caught his breath, picked up the chalk, and explained simply, "It's on the tip of my tongue." Several people excitedly threw their hats into the air. Some shouted what would have been a loud hurrah, and the rest pushed the heavy cannon into place. They aimed it directly at the thickest part of the fortress wall and packed it full of gunpowder. Milo stood on tiptoe, leaned over the cannon's mouth, and parted his lips. The small sound dropped silently to the bottom, and everything was ready. In another moment, the fuse was lit and sputtering. "I hope no one gets hurt," thought Tok. And before he had time to think again, an immense cloud of gray and white smoke leaped from the gun, and along with it, so softly that it was hardly heard, came the sound of butt. It flew toward the wall for several seconds in a high, lazy arc, and then struck ever so lightly just to the right of the big door. For an instant, there was an ominous stillness, quieter and more silent than ever before, as if the air was holding its breath. And then, almost immediately, there was a blasting, roaring, thundering smash, followed by a crashing, shattering, bursting crash, as every stone in the fortress came toppling to the ground and the vaults burst open, spilling the sounds of history into the wind. Every sound that had ever been uttered or made, from way back to when there were none, to way up to when there was too many, came hurtling out of the debris in a way that sounded as though everyone in the world was laughing, whistling, shouting, crying, singing, whispering, humming, screaming, coughing, and sneezing, all at the same time. There were bits of old speeches floating about, as well as recited lessons, gunshots from old wars, babies' cries, auto horns, waterfalls, electric fans, galloping horses, and a great deal of everything else. For a while, there was total deafening confusion, and then, almost as quickly as they'd come, all the old sounds disappeared over the hill in search of their new freedom, and things were normal again. The people quickly went about their busy, talkative business, and as the smoke and dust cleared, only Milo, Tok, and the humbug noticed the soundkeeper sitting disconsolately on a pile of rubble. "I'm terribly sorry," said Milo sympathetically as the three of them went to console her. "But we had to do it," added Tok, sniffing around the ruins. "What a terrible mess," observed the humbug, with his knack for saying exactly the wrong thing. The soundkeeper looked around with an expression of unrelieved sadness on her unhappy face. "It will take years to collect all those sounds again," she sobbed, "and even longer to put them back in proper order. But it's all my fault, for you can't improve sound by having only silence. The problem is to use each one at the proper time." As she spoke, the familiar and unmistakable squinch-squanch of the Din's heavy footsteps could be heard plodding over the hill. And when he finally appeared, he was dragging an incredibly large sack behind him. "Can anyone use these sounds?" he puffed, mopping his forehead. "They all came over the hill at once, and none of them are awful enough for me." The Soundkeeper peered into the sack, and there were all the sounds which had burst from the vault. "How nice of you to return them," she cried happily. "You and the doctor must come by for an evening of beautiful music when the fortress is repaired." The thought of it so horrified the Din that he excused himself immediately and dashed off down the road in a great panic. "I hope I haven't offended him," she said with some concern. "He only likes unpleasant sounds," volunteered Tak. "Ah, yes," she sighed. "I keep forgetting that many people do, but I suppose they are necessary, for you'd never really know how pleasant one was unless you knew how pleasant it wasn't." She paused for a moment and then continued, "If only rhyme and reason were here, I'm sure things would improve." "That's why we're going to rescue them," said Milo proudly. And that's where we are going to stop. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. Sock says goodbye, farewell, see you later.